Good evening. My name is Terry Alford. Welcome to Our Story. It is so very exciting to know that for so many of you, as you unwind or begin enjoying your dinners tonight, you have welcomed us into your homes to listen to what's happening in the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor and on the east side of Buffalo. Our Story is just one more forum to keep you all informed. Again, Our Story will air at this time every Thursday evening right here on Waffle Radio Power 96.5 FM. Our story will feature guests, unknown facts, treasure stories, and themes that provide insight into the historic Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor. Join us and learn about the latest happenings in the corridor and meet the proud and resilient men and women living or conducting business within and around our historic neighborhoods on the east side. So with that, it brings me great pride and honor to introduce our guest tonight, Mr. Danny Williams, president of the Colored Musicians Club and Jazz Museum. The club and the Jazz Museum is dedicated to promoting research and preserving this history of African American music, not only in Buffalo but globally. We aspire to enlighten, encourage, and educate our youth of their music and heritage. So with that said, welcome, Danny. How are you?
Really great, Terry. Nice to be here. I'm fine. Thank you.
Good. So as we always do before we start off our storytelling and our informational sharing with our guests and our audience, we like to hear your story. We like to get the story of our guests. So could you maybe talk a little bit about yourself, how you got connected to the Jazz Museum and the club?
Well, first of all, I'm Buffalo born and raised. My initiation into the music world was, of course, the church. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a tabernacle in the corner of Purdy and Glenwood, going back to 1950. My first structured introduction was with Mr. Jonas Waits, who was a black music teacher in the city of Buffalo. And I believe I was in the 7th grade, and they chose 2 people out of every school and put together an all-city chorus, and they taught us to read, and that was my introduction. Mm-hmm. From there, I went on to play in high school, college, and when I came back to Buffalo after being away for 12 years in the military, I got into a band of folks who did Dixieland and jazz, and we came back from a gig we did in Las Vegas, and the trumpet player asked me to come down to the Colored Musicians Club. And my first thought was to punch him in the mouth, but he assured me it was a real entity and such a thing did exist. So I came down, and that was back in 1983, and I've been there ever since.
Oh, great. So, the Colored Musicians Club and Jazz Museum, the club itself is a historical place, offers a lot of history. Could you talk about its beginnings and what the mission of the club is?
The club is important, but even more important is what spawned the club. Mm-hmm. And that was the union back in 1917, when we were finally admitted into the American Federation of Musicians. We had petitioned for 20 years, but in 1917 we were finally given admittance as Local 533. And it was the union that decided to put everything into the name of the club, which became important later on in life. But the initial mission was to give black folks a chance to do some things that we couldn't do in the regular white world. They formed a credit union because we weren't doing business with banks. They formed a life insurance company so that you didn't have to pass the jar in order to bury somebody. And they formed other social organizations within the community. And the idea was to uplift the community, but it was by musicians.
Right. So you had your own credit union and
Absolutely.
Right. So, can you speak about the founders? Who helped found the union?
Well, there were a number of musicians at that time that were working to get us into the Federation. 2 of the more important ones was Raymond Jackson and Jesse Clipper. And they were 2 of the original signers on the charter in 1917. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because, when we talk about the corridor, it's almost like 2 steps of separation, 2 degrees of separation. So we talk about Raymond Jackson, we know he was the brother of Francis Nash, who was married to the esteemed the Reverend J. Edward Nash, who was the longest-serving pastor for the church itself. But could you maybe talk a little bit more about him and maybe about Jesse Clipper himself?
Well, Jesse Clipper was not only a musician. I think the important thing to realize, what we're talking about, is people who do whatever they do to make a living, but then again, they did it to make an impact in the community. For instance, Jesse Clipper was the first African American to die in World War I. It was amazing how these brothers and sisters were musicians. However, they were good citizens. They were rock solid black Americans.
Yes.
And what they did was they brought the community together with their own organizations and things outside of music, as well as try to make a living within the music world.
So, who are some of the people, some of the entertainers, some of the great folks that came through the club in those early years, right through today?
Wow. The idea in those days was we weren't getting the jobs in the big clubs and the white clubs where the money was. But what we did was we broke it down to the point where we had the type of music that everybody wanted to hear. But while we couldn't be sustained with that, we put together something that in those days were referred to as the Chitlin Circuit.
Wow.
And those were clubs in many cities around. They were owned, operated, and patroned by black folks. So when you got somebody like Duke Ellington that's playing down in New York, well, he knew that the train ran from Buffalo to L.A., all along the Northern Corridor. So he would go to those stops: Buffalo, Cleveland, Chicago, Kansas City, L.A., and then back again. So you got all of those folks coming through Buffalo who were giants, whether it was Duke Ellington, Miles Davis, Della Reese, Lena Horne, Ella Fitzgerald, all of those folks. And they stopped here. And many of them picked up musicians from Local 533, which was our union. Guys like, oh my God, Grover Washington from Buffalo, his mentor. And the idea was share the music. And that's the way it was in those days.
Right, right. You know, one of my favorite pictures in the museum, and right now the museum is being, reimagined as we speak. But when one would walk in the museum, what you would be hit with first was this large mural picture that featured in the foreground Dizzy Gillespie and some other musicians of the
standing
day.
Behind him was Elvin Shepard.
Shepard.
And Miles Davis, John Coltrane,
right.
And Judge Wilbur Trammell.
And what was always striking when you mentioned Miles Davis and John Coltrane, they were very young.
Yes.
They were looking through the door with these really looks of just being just awed by what was in front of them. And, we know their stories after, as they got older, they became iconic figures in the music scene as well. But it always it was emblematic to me that these are folks that were these two individuals waiting their turn, the next generation. Could you maybe speak to, when we say those giants whose shoulders we stand on today, why that is so very important? Dan, you do a great job of watching you with young people, conduct tours in the club and in the museum itself. You talk eloquently about the importance of heritage and history sharing and continuing the stories. Could you maybe really, with the audience, really expand on that?
Well, if you simply look at the bios of some of these folks, and you see that the music was necessary in order to bring them into the American way of life. All they wanted to do was have homes. They wanted to drive cars. They wanted their children educated. And this was their vehicle. It was music.
Right.
And they were all good folks. They started great organizations. They built great homes. They built communities. These were decent, nice American folks. They just happened to be wild musicians. They were very good at what they did. They worked at their craft. It was what they did for a living. And black folks in those days, it was okay to be an entertainer. That was left open to us. We didn't have many black engineers. We didn't have many black medical doctors. We didn't have many black professors. Myself, I didn't have a school teacher that was black until I was in the 6th grade, and she was the only one in the building.
Right. So when you look at the club as it is now, and you're in the midst of expansion, if folks come down to the intersection of Broadway and Michigan, you see the great progress happening with the transformational changes at the club and with the museum itself. Could you maybe provide some updates? So what's happening, where you are with the build, and when you're looking to reopen the club? We get a lot of asks and requests from folks who are always asking, so when is clubs going to be open? Could you maybe share some updates?
Well, due to COVID and cash flow issues, it's been a while since we've started the
Right.
project. But we hope to turn the key this June, maybe late
That's
June.
exciting. All right.
And the idea is we've expanded from 2,000 to 4,000 square feet.
Wow.
We're adding all sorts of programs. We're going to bring back weekly free jazz. We used to call it the jam session. We're going to expand that out into the jazz experience. And we're going to bring in new players, and we're going to bring in educational programs. We're going to bring in historic programs. We're going to be showing films. We're going to be having seminars. And the idea is to get our young folks into their heritage.
Right.
And we're also going to expand in the museum, where we're going to bring in different venues of jazz, which are all roots of gospel, of course.
Yes, of course.
And this year we're going to be adding funk, rap, and smooth jazz.
Wow. Okay. So are you looking at when you're going to be open in terms of hours and some of the events and activities that will be happening on a given day, a given week?
Well, we hope to do all of this in our opening in June or July, depending on construction. But go to our website, coloredmusiciansclub.com, and our website will keep you appraised of when we're doing things. And also, I'm sure that your organization is going to be doing a little advertising as well.
We can't wait to help start promoting. That's obviously that's a great celebration. When folks come down to the corridor, you see all of our what we call our anchors at different points and phases of their capital projects, construction and development, stabilization and expansion, and we're quite not just proud and excited about what's happening with the club and the museum there. We're anticipating, like you all are, the day where we can all walk in and enjoy the music, enjoy the exhibits, enjoy the history that the club represents itself.
It's us and where we came from. If you look at all through the South, we built monuments to people who were General E. Lee and people who raised the world on cotton.
Right.
And we have nothing of our own to show. So it's important when we build our edifices that reflect our culture, reflect our religion, reflect our food, reflect our lives, and our children who are valuable. We have to give them something they can look at. So the only statues they're not looking at are of Christopher Columbus, General Wardensky, Abraham Lincoln. And when we do get a statue of Martin Luther King, you can't even recognize him.
Right.
The idea is we have to give our children that are coming behind us something to look forward to, and let them know that they are valuable. Black lives do matter.
And you couldn't say it better. What we're trying to do here in the corridor is to really honor and really show, our appreciation for all those who came before us, including people like yourself and those who influenced you. And, that's vitally important, especially to the next generation behind us. We have to keep our stories going, our history and heritage going, because African Americans in this region was so vitally important to the progress of the region itself. And I think people don't have a real true sense of the art form called jazz, Danny. A lot of our young people don't even know what jazz is, or what the genesis of it was, or and why despite the changes, different genres, different groups and individuals that changes and takes it in other places in terms of art styles, why jazz has stood the test of time. Could you maybe share a little history about jazz, the birthplace of it, what was the genesis of it?
Oh, absolutely. I only need about a year. We built
You got 20 minutes.
We built a 1,000 square foot museum that explains all
Right.
of that. And of course it'll be open soon. But our life and everything that we had that gave us hope when we came to this country was religion. That was it. And the only music we had was the music that was a combination of what the Europeans made us listen to and what was in our spirit. And we called it gospel.
Yes.
That's the root of all African American music. And after that came ragtime, the blues, bebop, big band, swing, R&B, funk, rap, and of course today smooth jazz. Our music changes with our lives. For instance, when we had the gospel, it was, oh, Lord, let me work down here because tomorrow everything's going to be all right.
Right.
When I go to heaven, everything's going to be all right. The blues said, bump that. I'm going to have fun here and I'm going to have fun tomorrow. If I don't have fun tonight, I ain't got no reason to go to church tomorrow.
Right.
You know, I'm going to do my thing. And then the bebop came in and all of these other venues, big band, and you got into really expressive things like, I can't use those words, but let's say guys like Miles Davis and guys like John Coltrane and Charlie Parker, you know, and Horace Silver and these guys who came in and became very expressive and took the art to a new level. And today, you know, we have venues that are just as relevant, whether it's funk, rap, or even smooth jazz. They are still African American creations. In 1954, Congress wrote into the congressional record, jazz is an American art form of black folk music by Americans for Americans. We're here to stay, and our music is ever growing from that one root, which was the gospel.
Right. It amazes me that you just said it. Jazz is the true American art form. It's a truly American product. Okay, it didn't start anywhere else on the globe but here in America, but it was started by folks of color, African Americans, and so with that said, February is Black History Month. And for the third year running, the Heritage Quarter will again host a series of presentations titled There Are Stories to Tell, 2024 Black History Month Talks, which will occur every Wednesday evening in the month of February from 6 p.m. until 7:30 p.m. at the Meriwether Library at 1324 Jefferson Avenue. The presentations are also live streamed. These are free and open to the public, so anybody can come. On February the 21st, George Scott, the Colored Musicians Club member board of directors, he's a member of the board of directors. He's also the chairperson for events, for the events committee itself. He will be presenting the history of the Colored Musicians Club. Danny, could you maybe tease out what he might be talking about? I know a lot of the stuff we're talking about here tonight, but...
Absolutely not. George is going to bring on something that you guys are going to want to see and hear. Come and see and hear it.
Right.
But I would like to say this. There are other folks working on this. On our board of directors, we...
Sorry.
It's okay. We're all right.
We have Kathy Robertson working. She's our community chair. We have Omar Overstreet. He's our membership chair.
Okay.
We have Allison Dehoney. She's the chairperson of our education committee. She's working on this. The idea is we've got these younger folks coming in who are now going to determine the route and the direction of the Colored Musicians Club. It's not just about the music. It's about cranking out good people.
Right.
And these are all good folks, and we can't wait to put on our shows, to start doing things, educating, and getting the word out. But what we're going to be doing on the 21st at the at the library is simply stretching that. A year ago, we asked folks to take the African American history out of February and put it into the entire year.
Right.
And what we do now is we're expanding our program to run 12 months in the year.
Great.
And we are no longer going to just look forward to Black History Month. And the idea is it's going to be Black History Month every month.
Yeah, that's what I'm
We
talking
have
about.
plenty to be proud of.
Right.
At one time, we were only 13% of the population in this country, yet we were 30% of the war force. At this particular time, we're almost 29% of the population in the United States, yet we are 75% of the population that's in poverty. The club is going to use the music as our platform to teach, to educate, and to do something to move that needle forward. I was once asked a question in an interview from a PBS, why the certain influx and the movement towards Black Lives Matter, what has changed? And the answer is simple, nothing. The same thing that was happening in 1865 is happening in 2024.
Right.
That's why it's still going on. That's why we need to push. That's why we need to change. All of those things that we needed to do needed to be changed. Banking, we did a credit union. Life insurance, we could bury and buy property.
Right.
The idea now is, what other programs do we need to be doing to become a part of the American way of life, which is all we ask.
So, despite the challenges presented by your construction, and you and the club have been doing things all around the city. With musical events and activities, doing some history around music itself. So you haven't let construction or the pandemic or blizzards stop you, which is a great thing. It's an amazing thing to see. Could you speak to one of your great events that you do annually, the Queen City Jazz Festival? I attended last year and the year before that after the pandemic, and those continue to be great things. It's continuing to grow.
Back in 2005, George Scott, who was the president at that time, we sat down and we were brainstorming about what we were going to do in the future for programming. And George says, well, we need to do one of those free festivals in streets where we can bring in artists and have the community come for free. And I said, okay, what's the budget? He pulled out the checkbook. I think we had $230.
Right.
So we said, well, this is going to be hard. But George insisted, and he persisted, and we brought Mr. George K. Arthur in. We asked him. He laughed, got up, drank his water, and left. But we got him back, and we got into the discussion. Right. And that was the first year, 2005. Right. And this is the 19th annual. Like I said, the budget that year was $230.
Isn't that amazing? Wow.
Today, our T-shirt bill is about $3,000.
It just shows the continued growth and the interest.
Those people, like I mentioned before, they're all working very hard. We start on that the month after the old festival ends. The last Saturday in July, and it's going to be the Queen City Jazz Festival. And if you miss it this year, you're going to kick yourself in the butt. So we bring in the heavy hitters.
Oh, so you're not going to share who those are right
Absolutely.
now? Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You're going to share them?
Not.
Oh.
George Scott will be making the appropriate announcements at the appropriate time, and he'll have it on our website. Oh, by the way, our new webmaster, she is the bomb. I think you guys are going to love what Regina Moody is doing.
Okay.
And stand by, and we'll get you notified.
Sounds exciting. Sounds exciting. So could you talk about some of the other things that you're doing around the city? Because I see the club or members of the club all over the place.
We're doing a jazz series at the end of every month, and we're doing it at different locations because we can't do it in our building. We've been using the Buffalo Museum of History and other venues in the city. And the idea is to bring in artists along with local artists,
right,
so that the two can mix, and our folks can get to see these folks without having to pay a lot of money.
So I know we still have some time left. Going back to your involvement with the club, you've met a lot of people. Could you maybe speak to some of those individuals that really made the biggest impact on your life while you were associated with the club?
I think that my biggest thrill was meeting people who came through who had been here years before. We were at the museum one afternoon, and a man comes in, and he says he used to be the house drummer back in 1951.
Right. Okay, 1951.
1951. Okay. I said, well, what are you doing now? He says, I live in Stockholm. I teach drumming.
Wow.
We had people come in from Frankfurt, Germany. They brought their entire high school band with them.
Can you say that again?
They brought their entire high school jazz
from
band.
Stockholm.
That was from Frankfurt.
From Frankfurt. Okay.
From Frankfurt.
Okay.
And we brought them in. We gave them a tour of the museum. They were wowed.
Sometimes to me, but we have to do better jobs at improving on that. Right?
It's a worldwide music. People don't understand that. I think when our schools gave up music programs, and unfortunately, every time the school cuts their budget, the first thing they do is they go after the arts. Music and art is just as important as other things in your life. It balances your life out.
Right.
By simply learning to read, and this is a scientific effect, you will increase your mathematic acuity by 10%.
Okay. So you were a former Buffalo police officer, and you've seen a lot of growth on this in the especially the east side of Buffalo, especially as it applies to the corridor. Could you maybe speak to the audience about, how great are some of the great things in terms of progress that you've seen? Is this your time?
Yes. We have a rich history in the United States, a rich history in New York State, and a rich history in Buffalo. When I was born and grew up in Buffalo, it was a steel-based, automobile-based industry. Republic Steel had 15,000. Bethlehem Steel was 24,000. These are the employees. American Steel. The idea was good jobs, but when the good jobs left, that became an issue. So you had other organizations that filled the space with trying to do cultural things, like with the African American Police Association for black cops, MOCA, Men of Color helping all for the black firefighters, colored musician clubs with the black musicians. We filled in with programs to try and give our youth something to do and something that can give them a leg up in life. Music was my step. No matter what I did for a living, my degrees are in sociology and mathematics, but I never stopped playing.
And it shows, your appreciation, your passion for the music. Who were some of your teachers?
Oh my God, the Dr. Donald Lamar Hilliard, the Willie Dorsey, the Jonas Waits. These are all black men. And I didn't know there were black teachers until I saw Dr. Waits.
Right.
And the idea was they taught me to read. Right. Before I learned to read, my math was horrible. Math increases music increases your acuity. All of a sudden, math made sense.
Right. Well, as we near the end of the show, I just want to remind, our audience, our listening audience, that on February 21st, George Scott will be at the Meriwether Library to present on the history of Colored Musicians Club. Again, this is free and open to the public, happening at Meriwether on Wednesday, February the 21st. So we encourage you to come and hear more and learn more about the club at that point. Ask George questions. He's a great authority on the club and the museum and what's happening here. We also want to especially thank Mr. Williams, Mr. Danny Williams, for coming tonight and sharing some of his stories, sharing some of the history of the club. Hopefully some of you learned something or appreciated at least some of the history that was shared here tonight. That's the end of our show. Danny, you have anything else you want to leave the audience with?
I challenge everybody that's listening, do something in March, April, May, June through December to make a change so that this time next year you will be able to say you did something to move the needle.
Couldn't close it out better than myself. If you want more information about the Heritage Corridor, we encourage you to go to MichiganStreetBuffalo.org or call our office at 716-322-1002. That's it. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
You had to bring up a